Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us here at Live Now from Fox on this Monday, October 20th. We are taking a live look here at the White House over in Washington, D.C. as we continue to monitor all of your top stories throughout this week and everything that happened throughout the weekend. My name is Carel, and I'll be with you throughout the next several hours, again, showcasing all of those live images and live events from around the world. And at this time, we do want to focus the latest on the developments in the Middle East. Taking a look here at these images that we're getting out of Gaza at this time. Take a look at that. A lot of smoke out there in the distance. Not entirely sure what that smoke is at this time. But the Associated Press recently reporting that Gaza's fragile ceasefire facing its first major test on Sunday as Israeli forces launched a wave of deadly strikes, saying Hamas militants had killed 2 soldiers, and an Israeli security official said the transfer of aid into the territory was halted. Military later saying that it resumed enforcing the ceasefire, and the official confirmed that aid deliveries would resume today, on Monday. The official spoke on condition of anonymity to the Associated Press because he was not authorized to discuss the issue in the media. Joining us now to continue this conversation even further is Jonathan Conricus. He is a senior fellow with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. And Jonathan, we appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on, and a good morning.
Good morning to you as well. So you can offer us a unique perspective on this entire issue because you are actually based in Israel right now. Given the fact that the ceasefire was first established a couple of weeks ago, what are you hearing on the ground? What is the sentiment like at this time?
Yes, so the situation on the ground is that currently it's relatively stable, and it appears that both sides, Israel and Hamas, have been told by President Trump and his team to get on with it and to get back to the ceasefire, despite the fact that Hamas is violating it repeatedly, and Israel yesterday responded also by using force in self-defense. What we've had over the last few days, just to recap briefly for our viewers, is that the major event was the return of 20 live Israeli hostages. They were returned to their families. That's a massive milestone, and that is the biggest part of phase 1. Now, the second part of phase 1, which has not yet been completed, is that Hamas are supposed to hand over all of the bodies of the hostages that they took 2 years ago on October 7 and murdered in captivity. So far, Israel has received less than half of the 28 bodies that we know Hamas is keeping. And that's a major violation of the agreement. And in Israel, we understand, and I think the Americans see it the same way, that Hamas is intentionally dragging its feet. And in Israel, the perspective is that as long as phase 1 isn't implemented, then there's no reason to go over and transition to phase 2, because phase 1 should happen first and should be completed in its entirety and successfully.
I want to put up a post here from the Israel Defense Forces. And again, we are taking a live look out here in Khan Yunis in Gaza. But this is what the Israel Defense Forces said on X. In accordance with the directive of the political echelon and following a series of significant strikes in response to Hamas's violations, the IDF has begun the renewed enforcement of the ceasefire in line with the terms of the agreement. The IDF will continue to uphold the ceasefire agreement and will respond firmly to any violation of it. Jonathan, what are some of the challenges that the IDF is facing right now, even with the ceasefire in place, to be able to get control of the situation? And as you mentioned, to make sure that the bodies of the remaining hostages who are deceased are returned?
Yes, what's happening on the ground and what has been happening in the last week or so is that Hamas is busy violating the agreement in several ways. Basically executing Palestinians on the streets. They're rounding up people that they don't like, people that they see as political rivals, people from clans, from families that they don't approve of, and they're very bluntly executing them in town squares and then posting the videos proudly on social media in order to deter other people from having the having the audacity to stand up against Hamas. So that's one thing that's happening. Severely, yesterday, Hamas attacked Israeli troops. Israeli troops were on the correct side of the ceasefire line, where there are supposed to be the yellow line according to the ceasefire. And Hamas attacked Israeli troops in two separate locations. One of those attacks, unfortunately, led to the killing of 2 Israeli soldiers and wounding of 5 others. That is the backdrop. And when you reference the tweet that you just read now from the IDF, that is what happened yesterday. Hamas attacked and Israel, and unfortunately, Hamas killed 2 Israeli soldiers, and then the IDF responded to it. However, the most important thing is that even though Hamas is in violation of the ceasefire, Israel hasn't responded with any major steps. We see the Rafah gate is open today, and we see dozens, and it will be eventually hundreds of trucks carrying aid that will be entering Gaza, despite a lot of frustration inside Israel. And Israelis, many are saying, well, Hamas is violating the agreement. They're not handing over bodies of hostages. They're killing our soldiers. They're attacking on the ground, and they're executing Palestinians. And we're going on with business as usual. It's a bit of an odd situation. I'm sure that there's a lot of political pressure on Israel to stay within the realm. And the tweet that you read, where the IDF declares pretty clearly that we're going to implement the ceasefire, is a result of American pressure on Israel.
And we're going to talk about some of the aid going into Gaza in just a minute. But first, to your point within that last answer, I want to put up this social media post from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It says this: Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, quote, "On behalf of the entire people of Israel, my wife and I send our heartfelt condolences to the families of the Nahal Brigade soldiers, Maj, Yaniv Kula, and Staff Sergeant Itay Yatvets, of blessed memory, who fell in the difficult incident in Rafah." Jonathan, going back to that aid going into Gaza right now, what do we know about the organizations that are going to help facilitate that? And what do we know about the amount of aid and what's actually going to be going in to that area?
Yeah, so there's massive aid coming in, hundreds of trucks. I think we will see around 400 trucks if everything goes according to plan. So more than 400 truckloads of aid, food, medicine, some clothing, some shelter, but the majority of the items will be bulk food and medicine. Water is being provided from Israel and from Egypt with various pipelines that are open and running and providing fresh drinking water for people. But one organization that is making a lot of noise, but very little contribution on the ground, is UNRWA. UNRWA, the UN Relief and Work Agency, which up until October 7 was really a partner of Hamas and has been really important for Hamas to continue to stay in power, they are now lobbying hard around the world, in Washington and in international media, to be included in the day after in Gaza, and they're claiming, wrongfully, that they are important in distributing the aid. And that is not true. What's happening on the ground is that there's various other UN organizations and also the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, an American NGO that is distributing food in the southern part of Gaza. So there's lots of various UN organizations and non-UN organizations that are distributing food and other supplies to Gazans. UNRWA is trying to become relevant again. My advice would be, if we want to see a different Gaza in the future, a de-radicalized Gaza, a Gaza that is, more prosperity-oriented and perhaps civil rights-oriented, UNRWA, just like Hamas, needs to go.
Finally, Jonathan, later on this morning, we are expecting Prime Minister Netanyahu to address the Knesset, similar to what we saw last Monday when that ceasefire was first implemented and those 20 living hostages were returned back to Israel. What do we expect the Prime Minister to focus on as he addresses the Knesset today?
I think in form with his previous speeches, I assume that he will speak about the successes and achievements under his leadership, near and far. And I think he will try to rally support in Israel for the current situation and the current ceasefire. And he will try to get as many parties and people and elected officials on board with supporting this ceasefire, despite the fact that when you measure it technically, Hamas is this through. I think he has grand designs about the future, eagerly anticipating normalization deals with the Saudis, perhaps progress with the Syrians. There have been direct negotiations. Ambassador Dermer on behalf of Israel, or Minister Dermer on behalf of Israel, and the Syrian foreign minister, they have been working under American guidance and help to make some kind of normalization deal. So we should anticipate that as well. And I think Prime Minister Netanyahu will be forward-looking in the sense of showing Israelis what he has achieved, he and his government has achieved. I don't think he will speak a lot about the things that the government has not achieved and what needs to be done, but really what can be achieved from the ceasefire, and try to get his government to continue to support the ceasefire, which, by the way, I think has very strong public general support in Israel. People are happy that the hostages are home. People want to see the bodies of the murdered hostages home, and then to continue life without having to go to war.
Jonathan Conricus, a senior fellow with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, we appreciate your time this morning to touch on the topic. Take care. We're going to continue on to follow all of the latest regarding the developments in the Middle East. I want to take us back out to the live image that we have continued to show you. This is over in Khan Yunis in Gaza. And again, the aid is going to be resuming today. As expected, later on this morning, we're going to be hearing from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. At this time, his address to the Knesset will all be in Hebrew, but if he does make some of those comments in English, we'll bring them to you here, as always.